All right, so the next topic I'm looking to cover today is going to be in regards to your fitness and exercise progression, your adaptation as it relates to your age. So, how young or how old you are. Typically, I hear a lot in my experience of, oh, I'm older now, I got to take it easy, I can't do what I used to do, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of used as a cop out card to an extent, but also there's some legitimate concerns that people have with getting older and exercising and not wanting to get hurt. So I just want to again shed some light on the evidence, shed some light on my experience in terms of understanding and changing the mindset of this degeneration as you get older. Right, as a species, as the human race, we are an adaptive species, and we continue to adapt until the day we die, right? So we shouldn't take on this mindset that we hit the peak of the mountain and then it's all downhill from there and we're just scathing off death, right? That's psychosocially, that's an unhealthy mindset to take on, a very depressing mindset, but also it's just not biologically true, right? So there's two routes that I want to take this conversation when it comes to age. The first route is kind of the 30 to 40-year old, that middle age, younger middle age, that this is when I see a lot of these statements start to creep in, like, oh, I'm not in my 20s anymore, I'm not in my prime, I just can't do the things I used to do. And it's more of a mental block than anything. We're going to talk why that is, and why you need to take on a healthier mindset there. And then the second half of the topic, I want to cover more towards the even older population, 50, 60, 70 years old, because I have some specific research and data and experimentation on that that shed some positive light. So dialing back to the first half, the middle age, 30s and 40s, early 50s, this mindset that you're not in your prime now, you're not in your 20s now. The body's starting to degenerate. You can't do the things that you used to do. You're going to get hurt more often. It's simply not true, right? And what we need to understand at this age in this population is that, yes, to an extent, there's some truth behind you're not a young spring chicken anymore, right? You are not growing anymore. You're not in this robust adaptation phase of your life as you were in your teenage years and your younger to middle 20s. However, what you do have on your side is the accumulation of training, right? You have training age on your side, which, with some statistics I'm going to show in a little bit, actually trumps this spring chicken feel of your teenage years and your early 20s. So what I mean is, by having an accumulation of training age, is that we think of adaptation on a smaller scale. I'm stronger than I was before because I've been lifting weights for a couple weeks now, or a couple months now, or a couple years now. Right, when you first started lifting weights, 4 weeks later you were stronger than you were 4 weeks before, and a year later you're generally stronger than you were a year before. And this is an accumulation of training on the body, right? We don't have to view adaptation as something that happens just overnight in a 24-hour period. Hey, I did really good in the gym today, so I've adapted to that, and it stops there. No, it's more of a 401k mentality rather than a instantaneous mentality, right? So the general trend line is upwards, even though day to day or week to week you might be going up and down. You might have good days, you might have bad days, but the accumulation of your training over the years is creating more and more adaptations. And so, realistically and applicably speaking, we see this most recently. I want to show, just because it was the most recent in the news, the IPF World Championships. This is powerlifting specifically, but it does prove the point that I'm trying to get across. A ton of world records were being broken in the open division by a certain population. focusing specifically on the squat, we have this guy named, I'm just reading it right now, Jesse Yupa, squats 1,036 pounds raw for a world record. And the interesting thing to note is that he is 36 years old, right? Ray Williams is another popular guy, didn't do so well this year, but he's in his mid-30s as well, squatting 900, close to 1,000 pounds. The famous Jim Wendler, 2008, I believe, he squatted 1,000 pounds. He was in his mid-30s then. And a couple Russian names up here that I can't pronounce. They're in their 40s squatting world records, things that they haven't ever done before. And the reason is because they have an accumulation of training. Yes, they're older. Yes, they're not young like they used to be. But what they do have on their side is years and years and years of accumulated training stress, right? This 1,000-pound squat didn't just happen because they focused in for one solid year and trained hard and got themselves up to 1,000 pounds, right? This 1,000-pound squat took a decade to accumulate and train for, right? Whether they were close to it or not 5 years ago didn't matter. It was the continuous day out and day in of training and that accumulation that gets them to these squats. So you'll see a lot of these world records in the open divisions from guys in their mid to late 30s and even in their 40s because it takes that long in training. So the point that I'm trying to drive home is, if you're in your 30s and 40s, yes, you're not like you were when you're 20, but you have a greater advantage, and that's the accumulation of all your years of training under you. So the only thing holding you back in this age is your mindset, right? Is the psychosocial barrier. You're telling yourself that you're not what you used to be, and that's what's going to hold you back. So you can stick to that mindset, or you can appreciate what you've done over the past decade of training or more, and keep pushing it and keep setting records and keep making yourself better, right? This mindset of I'm over the hill now and it's all downhill is inappropriate to have mentally, and physically and biologically. It's actually just not factual. So that's the first half of the conversation. In the second half, I want to revert to a pretty interesting study that was done, published in the Journal of Exercise Physiology, titled "Do Younger and Older Adults Experience Similar Adaptations to Individualized Exercise Training?" So to sum it up, they've got populations between 18 and 35, and then from 50 to 70, right? Those were the two separate groups that they had. And long story short, they put them on individualized programs. That's the key here that we'll get back to, and titrated and adjusted things accordingly for what they could currently handle, and then progressed them. And I believe it was after, let's see here, 12 weeks. Yes, 12 weeks of training. There's 3 different phases. Let's see here. No, I'm sorry. 2 weeks of training, 8 weeks exercise program separated into 2 phases, phase 1 and phase 2. So after 8 weeks of training, they retested their strength, their cardiovascular capacity, and some other endurance metrics. So it wasn't just strength-based, but just multifaceted performance-based metrics. And they found that there was no change in the magnitude of adaptation. So we're not talking absolute, right? They weren't, the older population wasn't matching absolutely performance metrics of what the younger population was hitting, but what they were equal on was their rate of adaptation, right? The magnitude at which they increased from week 1 to week 8 was the same magnitude that the younger population increased. And so what the study is showing us is that the process of adaptation is not being hindered, right? So I'm not stating that a 70-year-old is as strong or as in shape as the 20-year-old. What I'm stating is that his ability to adapt as a human species, as a human being, has not changed, has not been hindered. What we need to understand, and what we get wrong a lot of times, is that when we are older, we look back at the younger days and we're like, oh, I just can't do what I used to do. And then we try to do the things that we did when 30 years prior, and we're devastated by it because we can't handle it. And the issue is that you're doing an inappropriate load. You're not individualizing your training for where you're at now, right? This is not age bound. This is for anyone, right? You're creating an error that happens across any age population. If you're training inappropriately, if you're doing things that you cannot currently handle, you will not adapt and you will get injured, right? This isn't restricted to you being old in age. So what we see is that we need to still meet you where you're at, where your current fitness abilities are, and then create appropriate individualized progression, and you will have the same magnitude of adaptation as somebody 30 years younger than you. We just need to start you where you're at. And again, this isn't because you're old. This is for anyone. If somebody in their 20s is completely deconditioned and I inappropriately train him with too high of loads, too high of volume, what have you, they're going to have the same result as somebody in their 50s and 60s that thinks they can do what they did when they were 30. It's just an inappropriate load, inappropriate volume, and there wasn't appropriate adaptation. So the only thing really holding you back as you age from exercise and bettering your health and improving is your mindset, right? If you're middle-aged right now, or even on the younger side, right, in your 30s, 40s, young 50s, you've got training age on your side, right? You have what the 20-year-old doesn't have, and that's experience. Conversely, if you are later in life, 50s, 60s, 70s, the magnitude at which you are adapting is no less than that younger population, right? You just need to train appropriately where you're at. So don't hold yourself back just because of your age, right? Keep a healthy mindset. Be cautious and confident. Be humble with yourself. Know your current fitness level. Get a professional to create an appropriate program for you based off of your current fitness level, and create a progression as if you would for anyone else. It just needs to be adapted and critiqued individually. So that's all I got for this one. Just a quick one, sharing some evidence and some experience there. I'll link the research article in the description, but have that healthy mindset. Look at these world record holders that are in their 30s and 40s. Look at the evidence there showing that magnitude is no different between young and old. Keep training, stay healthy, and do it appropriately. Next conversation is going to cover the strength as a whole, just the generality of strength. Essentially, I'm going to be discussing the specificity of strength, right? What constitutes strength and what are its variables. So if we understand strength specificity, then we can better dictate training and organization of what we're trying to accomplish.